Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Here we dive into the most shocking survival stories under the most extreme conditions. Today I'm going to tell you a story that will make you rethink everything you know about the limits of human endurance. Picture this. Young athletes fly into an important match when their plane crashes into the snow-covered peaks of the Andes. Out of 45 people on board, only 28 survive. But that's just the beginning of their nightmare. Ahead of them lies 72 days at an altitude over the 3 kilometers, in a frozen hell where temperatures drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius. What would you be willing to do to survive? What sacrifices would you make when your only chance is death or breaking humanity's most sacred taboos? And what happens to people when they realize no one is looking for them, and their only salvation lies in their own hands? The story you're about to hear will show you both the darkest and brightest sides of human nature. This is a story about how ordinary young people were forced to become cannibals to survive, and about how two of them accomplished the impossible, walking through the Andes without equipment to save their friends. October 13th, 1972 should have been just another ordinary day for the Old Christians rugby team from Montevideo. 19 young athletes, along with friends, family members and coaches, were heading to Chile for a friendly match against the Old Boys team. Among the passengers was 22-year-old Nando Parado, a cheerful son of a wealthy merchant who dreamed of a career as a race car driver and was known for his love of speed. Roberto Canessa, a 19-year-old first-year medical student who dreamed of becoming a surgeon. Antonio Vizintin, one of the team's strongest players. Gustavo Zerbino, the team's captain and the natural-born leader. And 31 other people who had no idea they were flying toward a test that no human had ever endured before. Originally, the team was supposed to fly out on October 12th, but fate seemed to be warning them. Due to a severe storm over the Andes, the Fairchild FH-227D, a turboprop aircraft with a questionable reputation, was forced to make an emergency landing in Mendoza, Argentina. The passengers spent a restless night at a hotel, not knowing it would be their last peaceful night. On the morning of October 13th, despite unfavorable weather reports, the crew made their fatal decision to continue the flight. The plane was supposed to fly strictly along an air corridor, skirting the highest peaks of the Andes. But here occurred the fatal error that would cost 29 people their lives. The pilots failed to account the strength of the headwind and requested permission to descend too early, thinking they had already passed the dangerous mountain zone. In reality, they were still in the very heart of the Andes, at an altitude over 4 kilometers. At 3:30 p.m., the plane traveling at 350 kilometers per hour crashed into an unnamed peak at 4,200 meters altitude. The impact was of monstrous force. First, the right wing tore off, taking several passengers with it. Then the left. The tail section with cargo hold and 3 passengers broke off and fell separately. The remains of the fuselage, turning into giant deadly sleds, hurtled down the snow-covered slope at the speed of the freight train. Nando Parado, who lost consciousness on impact, later recalled this moment. I only remember the deafening roar of metal, heart-wrenching screams of people, and the feeling that the whole world was turning upside down around me. And then came dead silence, the kind of silence you can only hear in the mountains. When the dust and snow settled, the scene was apocalyptic. 12 people died instantly, some from hitting the rock, others fell out of the plane during the breakup. The fuselage had turned into a metal tomb, only 9 meters long, littered with bodies, debris and luggage. But the most terrible ordeal was just beginning. The survivors awakened in true high-altitude hell. Picture this place. An altitude over the 3 kilometers above sea level, where every breath comes with difficulty due to thin air. The temperature barely rises above freezing during the day and drops to minus 30 degrees at night. Hurricane-force winds pierce you to the bone, and all around only snowy peaks stretching beyond the horizon. Most of the survivors had no warm clothing. They were flying to Chile in summer where October should have been spring. Some were in light shirts, others in jeans and sneakers. Clothing that was fine for a city stroll, but was deadly inappropriate for surviving in the Andes. Roberto Canessa, the only one with medical knowledge, suddenly became the chief doctor for 28 wounded people. He later recalled, "Before me lay people with compound fractures, gaping wounds, possible internal bleeding. One had a crushed chest, another had broken ribs, and I didn't have a simple bandage, let alone painkillers. I had to tear shirts into strips, use metal fragments from the plane as splints for fractures. But medical aid turned out not to be the most critical problem. Much more terrifying was hunger. The food found in the plane was catastrophically little: 8 chocolate bars, a can of peaches, several packets of nuts, a bottle of wine, and a box of crackers for 28 hungry, freezing people. These supplies lasted only 2 days. Now imagine yourself in their place. You realize you are in one of the most inaccessible and hostile places on the planet. For hundreds of kilometers around, only snow, ice, and impregnable cliffs. The nearest human settlement is farther than you could ever walk, and every night could be your last if the temperature kills you in your sleep. On the 8th day, something happened that finally stripped them of hope. Someone managed to tune a small radio, and they heard the devastating news. The search for the missing Uruguayan aircraft in the Andes has been called off. Authorities believe no one could survive in such conditions. Nando Parado remembered, "I'll never forget that moment. We realized no one is looking for us. We are on our own. Either we find a way out or we die here." But this time, hunger had become unbearable. Young, strong guys were losing several kilograms every day. Some could no longer stand from weakness. And then someone spoke aloud what everyone was thinking but was afraid to say. Nearby lay the bodies of their dead friends, frozen by the cold, perfectly preserved. And the group faced a choice that would divide their lives into before and after. Roberto Canessa, as the only one with medical education, was the first to find the strength to speak the unspeakable. "If we don't do this, we will all die. Our bodies need protein and fats to function. And our friends, they would want us to survive. They would understand." But understanding and willingness to act are completely different things. Many categorically refused, cried, prayed, ready to die rather than cross the sacred line. Gustavo Zerbino, the team captain, abstained from food for several days, preferring slow death from starvation. Imagine this nightmarish moment. You hold in your trembling hands a piece of frozen meat and realize it is the flesh of your friend, with whom just a week ago you were laughing, making future plans, talking about girls. But the alternative is simple and cruel. This or death. Not quick death, but agonizing torture, stretched over weeks of starvation. Fernando Parado would later confess, "The first time was impossible. I sobbed like a child. I was sick to my stomach. I felt like I was betraying not only my friend's memory, but everything my parents had taught me. But the hunger took over. The survival instinct proved stronger than all moral principles or religious commandments. They developed cruel but necessary rules. They started with those they knew least, crew members, passengers not connected to the team. No one ate the flesh of their close relatives. They prayed before each meal, asking forgiveness from God and from the souls of the dead. And with each day it became easier. The terrible truth is that humans can get used to absolutely anything when it comes to survival. What seemed unthinkable at the first day became routine by the end of the week. But fate, as if mocking their suffering, decided the trials were far from over. On the 16th day, deep in the night, something happened that nearly put a final end to their survival story. A giant snow avalanche thundered down from the mountain slope and completely buried the remains of the fuselage where the exhausted survivors slept. The panic was indescribable. People suffocated, clawed at the snow with bare hands until they bled. They screamed. Those sounds couldn't penetrate the snow mass. 8 people, almost a third of those remaining, suffocated under the multi-meter layer of snow within minutes. The rest spent 3 endless days in snowy captivity, digging tunnels and passages with bare hands, fighting for every gulp of thin air. Carlos Paez, one of the youngest in the group, recalled, "I thought I was going insane. Darkness, lack of air, cold. We dug like moles, not knowing if we were moving in the right direction. Every minute could have been our last." When they finally broke through to the surface, only 19 of them remained. But most importantly, after the avalanche, it became absolutely clear they could no longer wait for rescue. No one would come for them. Either they would find their own way out of this icy hell, or they would all die in this snowy grave like their friends. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa proposed the impossible, to walk through the Andes on foot, without equipment, without experience, without map. Just walk west toward where Chile should be. The others considered them mad. Professional climbers with full equipment died in these mountains, and they were going to traverse them in makeshift gear. On the 60th day, the three strongest, Parado, Canessa, and Antonio Vizintin, set out. They had a supply of food made of human flesh for several days, sunglasses made from plastic and sleeping bags sewn from the seat upholstery. The first days of the expedition were a real nightmare. They climbed up icy slopes, sinking into the snow up to their waists, climbing to an altitude of 4,500 meters, where the air is so thin that every step echoed with a pounding heart and the burning pain in the lungs. The makeshift equipment constantly broke. Feet in socked boots froze until they lost feeling. At the third day it became clear that they had overestimated their strength. Antonio Vizintin, despite his physical strength, began to lag behind and gasp for air. Every extra mouth meant less food for the others, and therefore fewer chances for everyone. So Vizintin was sent back to the group. Parado and Canessa remained alone in this icy hell. 10 endless days they walked through glaciers, skirted gaping chasms, scrambled over the rock slides, where every wrong step could be their last. They spent nights in rock crevices, pressed against each other to avoid freezing to death. Roberto Canessa later recalled these days. There were moments when I was ready to lie down in the snow and never get up again. My legs refused to obey, my lungs burned from lack of oxygen, and hunger had become constant torture. But Nando always found the strength to say, "One more day, one more step." Our friends believe in us and are waiting for us. We have no right to let them down. By the 7th day of their trek, the food was completely gone. They walked on willpower alone, sustaining themselves only with snow and rare sips of water from mountain streams. Their faces were sunburned and windburned beyond recognition, their lips cracked and bleeding, and their bodies had thinned to skeletal states. On the 70th day of their journey, Parado saw what seemed like a mirage, a green valley in the distance, the first signs of life during all their wandering. Descending to the river, they met Chilean shepherd. The old man was initially threatened. Two emaciated bearded men looked more like ghosts. But Parado wrote a note. "I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I've been walking for many days. There are still 14 people alive in the plane. Help us for God's sake." On December 22nd, on the 72nd day after the disaster, helicopters reached the crash site. 16 people were rescued. When the survivors told their story, the world was divided. Some called them heroes, others cannibals. Roberto Canessa said at the press conference, "We are not proud of what we had to do, but we are not ashamed of it either. We did what we had to do to survive." If you enjoyed this video and are interested in such survival stories, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. See you soon.